done some interviews. It's like I listen to myself sometimes. I'm like, oh my gosh, a lot of words.
So many words.
Winners never quit, and quitters never win.
Quitters win all the time. Let us show you how on Quit Happens.
Hey everyone, welcome to the next episode of Quit Happens. I'm your host, Lynn Marie Morski, and I just wanted to let you know where you can find out more about strategic quitting. You can go to quittingbydesign.com, or you can find me on Facebook and Instagram, also at Quitting by Design. I also wanted to say another thanks for the people who've left reviews and given us some 5-star ratings. It's really helpful to get us into good favor with iTunes when they're recommending podcasts to people. And so if you found this podcast helpful in your transition and you'd like to have other people be able to find it, a review or rating would be very, very much appreciated. Okay, now on to our guest. This week I'm talking with Travis Roznos. He's a certified Wim Hof Method instructor and men's work coach. Now, I met Travis through a group called the Next Generation Thought Leaders, and I'm a big fan of the Wim Hof Method, which we'll discuss on the show, so I just had to have him on to tell his story. So, without further ado. Hey Travis, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So Travis, I just found out, used to be my quasi-neighbor. You lived in Marina del Rey, California. I briefly lived in Venice, California. Those are right next to each other. So take us back to what you were doing in Marina del Rey and how that led to a quit and a life shift, we'll say.
Yes, absolutely. I know. I look back and, I had an apartment right next to the water. I'm like 25 years old. And the culmination of, I signed the letter, right? I signed the letter after college, like I'm on this corporate ladder climbing path. And it was all that I really had strived for in the past. And it was definitely sold to me as one of the only paths. And so after 4 years of really like nose down, it kind of all came crashing down. It was just like waking up on a Saturday morning, realizing, like I have so much to show for hard work. As in a sales career, I worked within the advertising technology space, did a lot of travel. I was on a plane like every week. And like on paper, it was like, this is more than I could have ever really hoped for. And I looked around, I looked into the parking lot. I see my BMW parked there. I see boats outside of my apartment window. And, this is all like far from me. I grew up, just raised by my mother in small town Wisconsin. Like she worked 3 jobs. Like, we weren't like homeless, but we didn't have a lot of money. So I realized all my behavior leading up to that point was like working so hard to get the opportunity to have things and like, live really nicely. But I was just completely empty. And it was like, I looked around my apartment. I'm like, well, none of this really resembles this external world that I'm looking at. It doesn't really resemble my internal landscape of my experience. And, it was like at that moment, I had a few of those moments, but it just sort of really piled up where I was like, if there's this much discrepancy between like this amazing place I'm at and I've got great friends in LA and I'm living by the ocean, but like I don't feel aligned with any of it, like I should really make a change. And I think it's just because I'm not doing anything that I'm passionate about.
And at that point, were there physical or emotional or mental signs and symptoms that led you to kind of put those pieces together?
That's a great question. What I noticed, what I always look back towards that I started to notice most was I would just check out more and more. And also I would hit snooze like 5 times in the morning. I feel like my mornings, I remember, especially like that last year there, like getting up in the morning became like this, big feat. And I've always actually been a morning person and, kind of a go-getter, but I really started to take inventory on like, I'm hitting snooze so much in the mornings. It's kind of like I'm already exhausted and haven't even gotten out of bed. So really low energy. And I wouldn't say I'm an introvert, but I definitely have isolated tendencies. I like to read. I like to be on my own a lot, but I'm also really, really social. Like, crazy, fun guy at the party, making jokes all the time. And I isolated more and more as well.
Interesting. Now, I love that you brought up the snooze button because there are a lot of things that are common themes throughout essentially human existence experience here that I think can be red flags to people. And one of them is the Sunday night dread,
Right.
and the case of the Mondays, and TGI Friday, and the snooze button. I think I hadn't previously put that with them, but you're absolutely right. That's a very common experience. If you don't want to go to the job you have, then you're not going to be happy that it's Sunday night because that job starts the next day. You're not going to be happy it's Monday for sure. You're going to be super happy it's Friday, but every morning, Monday through Friday, you're probably thinking about hitting that snooze button and postponing the inevitable.
Yeah, it's interesting what you're talking about are these extremes. For example, like I really leaned into this like work hard, play hard lifestyle. And it, as I grew older a little bit and sort of matured into like more responsibility and more travel and, you know, just giving my time, right, to companies and other people's like visions, like the weekends, I would kind of sabotage my energy because I would want to just check out. I would want to go party. I would want to be so far disconnected from like, returning back on Monday. But it was this huge peaks and valley, you know, type of managing of my energy. And so it just, that pretty much, you know, that's the bedrock of an unbalanced lifestyle at that point.
Yeah, for sure. And you brought up one other thing earlier in your story that I wanted to touch on that I think is another common theme, or at least it resonates with me. I'm also from the Midwest. I'm from a small town in Southern Illinois. And I also went through that period where, you know, we weren't wealthy. And so the measure of success becomes these things. I had the BMW. Like you said, I lived overlooking the beach at some point. That was in Ocean Beach, California, which is a very different thing than Marina Del Rey. But you grow up in the Midwest with these ideas of what it's like to make it, and you get those things, and you're like, oh, this isn't making it. I'm not happy. This is not the end all be all. And then there's that reevaluation like, okay, you know, now I drive a Mazda and I'm cool with it because I'm not working myself crazy to try to pay for something that doesn't make me happy when not working makes me a lot happier.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you started to have this realization, what kind of steps did you take? Did you think I need to leave this job?
Yeah, so I'll back up a bit too on the journey. Like I was really influenced at a young age by sports, and you know I didn't have a father around, so it was like I had this opportunity to kind of like find myself and my identity and my worth in activities that they really groom you to. You know, if you're doing really well, you're doing great. And you have to kind of navigate that feeling really bad and being hard on yourself if you're not doing so great. And it's kind of this up and down performance experience, right? Yeah. And being a male, trying to grab onto, you know, this idea of masculinity. And it was kind of especially hard for me because it was like I just had my mother and that was it. So sales for me, like I went through college and like all the teachers were like, well, he's a good communicator. He gets good grades because he tries, he has this work ethic. You know, he's a good writer. Maybe he should do something in like sales, right? I mean, there's few fields that he might excel in. And so I just took sales and I was like, well, if you're telling me like I can just pick up the phone a lot and if I work harder, I'll make more. So it ended up being years of just essentially adding that behavior on top of itself, right? Like when the numbers are really good, like I was really good. And like when the numbers weren't so great, I kind of assumed that with my identity and my worth. And like I wasn't feeling so great. And life is like our experiences added up and we have all these references. And so when you added that up, it was kind of these breaking points. I just sort of noticed heavier withdrawals of wanting to feel better about myself when I wasn't doing so great in work. And so once I became more aware, I was probably 25 or 26. I was reading a lot of books. So I was into personal development, but it was a lot of intaking of knowledge and information, but no real action and change towards things. So as these peaks and valleys just became, I guess, more intense, if you will, like I started to become really aware, like, wow, I really do feel confident and like only feel great about my experience. Like when this part of my life, i.e. work, and the numbers are good. And when they're bad, it sort of leaks into other areas of my life where I'm not as authentic and relating with my friends. I'm definitely more isolated. So I just started to become more aware. So inventory and the awareness, it came with maturity. Yeah. And it came with some hard times, right? Like relationships not really going very well. And like some experiences added up where finally I was at a place where, okay, I should take inventory. Like I'm really just putting my worth in how I feel good just throughout the day and with other people on when things are going well at work. And work is, again, it's somebody else's definition on like, if your numbers are good, like, hey, Travis, you're the guy of the month.
Yeah.
Not doing so good, you're essentially getting criticized and groomed into something better. And it's usually never good enough, because even if you're at 100%, you need to do better within a more materialistic and corporate environment. So again, it was really taking inventory. The first step was like, I now know I'm clearly giving away my worth, and it's leaking into other aspects of my happiness and my balance in my life. So.
Ooh, that is a good point. I recently, I guess about 5 months ago, quit my second job. I practiced medicine, and then I was working somewhere else. And I realized that trying to do both of those things and then take care of like the book that I am putting out, getting a publisher for that and getting a podcast started was so overwhelming that when people would ask how I was, I would sigh and then give, because I don't believe in just saying I'm fine. That's not authentic. That's, that doesn't get you anywhere. It doesn't foster any human connection. And even though nobody wants to hear you complain, I do feel as though like my honest reaction would flow out, and some version of like overwhelmed or something would come out. And that's part of when there were a series of things that made me realize I needed to quit the second job. But one of them was like, I don't want to say that anymore. I want, exactly like you said, I don't want that to leak into my interpersonal relationships outside of work.
Interesting.
When people say, how are you? I want to say, great, energized. I'm excited about the podcast. I don't want that to be my reality, and I don't want that to be what I share. So I appreciate that you had that same kind of experience.
Yeah. Really.
What did you do at that point? Now, I like that you brought up, okay, you're listening to podcasts, but you weren't doing anything about it. In medicine, we talk about like when somebody's going to quit smoking, there are these different stages that you're in. There's like the pre-contemplative state, the contemplative state. There's probably like an action state. And it sounds like you were kind of in the pre-contemplation, gathering knowledge state for a bit.
Yeah, definitely.
And then where did you go from there? What inspired you to take that knowledge you were getting from the podcast and the reading and the personal development and take action? Yeah.
And so I think at this point too, what's really coming up for me is on this journey of this quit, right? Like, there's a few things, but that inventory stage, like outside of realizing like I was in a job maybe that I wasn't really passionate about, the part that I think is the bigger quit, like in this whole thing, but it is that I really started to understand my role and my relationship, I guess, to what it means to be a man in like a socialized environment, in a big urban city like Los Angeles. And this happens everywhere, but, nice cars and nice things and roles and status and things like that, I think are a little bit more intense, where I had to put down an idea that like I needed to talk a certain way and wear certain clothes and talk openly about my status and like success, even though I wasn't really aligned with it. So it was like this intuitive pull that I started to feel that was, to your point, like when friends would ask me like, oh, how you're killing it at work, or how are things going? I just started to feel more and more like I was in another sales call, that I was selling something that wasn't truly mine. Just like at work, where it was like I was in constant sales meetings all day long, trying to kind of play this part of selling something that I wasn't really in line with. And so I started to see the reflection of the same thing in my quote unquote sales life, just in a social environment. And so I was taking inventory of that. It became really in tune with that. And then it was like, what I haven't really experienced yet, and at this point I was like 25 years old, I'm 30 now, but was like, I haven't really gotten strong mentorship. Didn't have a father growing up. I didn't have a grandfather really either, so it was like, I never had lessons on integrity. I didn't really have lessons on owning your truth and like owning what is and what isn't okay with you and your boundaries and things like that. So I just kind of sensed that. And I was like, there has to be something out there. Like, I don't want to read another book on some concept. I want to step into something that is going to like stretch me on who I am and like have somebody else be that experience. And so I just started researching mentorship for men and like initiations for men. And that's what I was researching. And I kind of came across new concepts, new ideas. And I came across organizations actually doing that, where you get taken out of your environment entirely, you put the books down and you step into the space with, teachers and mentors. And, so I that transitioned me into development that actually required me to have to go do something and step into a pretty confronting space versus you might read something that's confronting about habits or about, who you are and what you're aspiring to be, but you can read it in your living room and it's still pretty cozy there.
Yes, that is a very good point. Get out of your comfort zone, do something. Even if the doing thing isn't the quit, it's taking some action more than just imbibing all the knowledge. And it's probably going to help you put that knowledge into action some way or another.
Yeah.
And so for you, this was some type of men's retreat, correct?
Yeah. The my journey with, let's say, the beginning of the journey of like quitting what I thought it was to be a man, right, in like modern day society, which at that time I just thought it meant succeeding, being good with women, like all these like external buckets, that you can go on and on with, right? And yeah, I found the Mankind Project, which is an organization that I wholly stand behind still today. And they, they're a worldwide organization and they run initiation weekend or, retreat experiences for, men to really, really dig into the deeper issues in their life and like do it amongst other men, on a similar path. And it's extremely confronting, very confronting.
How interesting that I think you're the second or third person that I've had on the podcast in like 22 or so episodes to have brought up men's groups as a transformational tool. And
interesting.
Yeah. And what I like about that is that it gives you something to kind of hang your transformation on, which is like, let me transform as a man. Because I think a lot of this personal transformation is a little bit nebulous. And we're like, okay, I need to know how to be more in alignment with my higher self. But like, where do you find a mentor that just kind of aligns you with your higher self? But if you can say like, okay, right, as a man, I'd like to fit into society. And, and this is gender roles are as they are, heck, whatever your biology says, if you want to fit into society as a man, pick that thing. I'm not saying like, okay, XY chromosomes, people try this thing. But it seems as though that has been super effective for a lot of the men that I've talked to. And I'm not sure exactly what the alchemy is in these men's retreats. But instead, maybe that's an effective tool that people should look into if they feel as though the other avenues are just not concrete enough for them. Or maybe if they are male and they feel as though some of the avenues are a little bit too feminine or too in the feelings or in the emotion that they initially feel like, okay, that's maybe not where I am. Maybe these men's groups go about it in a way that's a little bit more palatable or effective. I don't know. It sounds like it was very effective for you.
Yeah, and there are women's groups these days too. There are growing populations of those kinds of experiences as well. And to even the playing field a little bit too, like for your listeners, whoever's listening, like I know we're talking about like a men's group or a women's group and all of that, like the framework in which that I'm coming from is more of the masculine and feminine from the standpoint of not what it is, like don't step into that place to be more masculine or to be more feminine, but balance in life. Like typically where it's masculine leadership is like more macro. I can look vision wide, like with structure in my business. And then the feminine is more me and my flow and like creativity and like creating content. And it can be having fun in your life. But the masculine part of your life is the structure in which, the container in which you build into your life to grow or to handle money and to et cetera, et cetera. So structure and flow. So all I'm saying is, anybody trying to or on their path, the group dynamic of like stepping into a place where other people are going through similar issues, it brings you back down to earth a little bit. It makes you be a little bit more compassionate with your own situation, gets you out of your head of just judging your situation because other people are going through those things. And then there's the trust dynamic where you can share a little bit more about what's going on. And then hopefully whatever group you're stepping into, these group experiences, if they're taught well, there's tools and certain exercises to actually help with your transformation, to help you actually move forward. And with the group experience, there's also accountability built in where, if you're trying to take action towards certain things, there are personality tendencies, if you will, where a lot of people are more, I think, inept or in tune to, holding themselves accountable. But if they're like kind of promising those actions to other people, right? They're actually including other people in their own accountability.
Yeah.
Because if we're left to our own devices, a lot of our conditioning comes up where we're blocked and we don't. we don't actually take the actions that we need to quit that job or to make the next step.
I appreciate that you refer to the blockages, because a lot of us, and I talk with other people who are in my same, entrepreneurial space, and we are like, why don't we just take the steps we need to? And there's the thought, like, are we just lazy? But I think you hit the nail on the head that we're all kind of realizing is that it's not a laziness. There's a blockage there. Something is keeping you from thinking that it's going to be successful, so you don't do it.
Yeah.
So through this work, now take us back to, like, you're still in your corporate job.
Yeah.
Does it move you toward quitting?
Yeah, at this point, I committed to going to the retreat, right? And it was a weekend experience that lit me up. I was like, oh my God, this is a whole nother, form of development. And I then joined a weekly men's group and kept going back and just stayed really disciplined with it. And funny things started to happen. I think, the process of really bringing all the stuff you've hid from other people for a long time, like to other people, even if it's just a stranger, but it's within a safe space, those blockages they digest a little bit. And slowly I started to just get a little bit more, I think, of a broader perspective, right? The broader perspective was, look, there's so many people that are close to me or like within a couple of connections, like they're all doing their own thing. Like they've started their own clothesline or they're doing this and that. And I'm like, it's all over the place. The internet is huge. Like there's really no excuse now. So I started to like really broaden the perspective of like, there's no reason why I can't figure out some way to create my own path as an entrepreneur, whatever that looks like. I didn't know specifically what it looked like, but I started to believe, right? I started to believe, and the belief started through references of other people. And then I started throwing out ideas to, a men's group that I was committed to. And I was like, I would really like to, I don't want to do what I'm doing. I don't know what it looks like, but here's what I'm thinking. And I started to get feedback on my gifts and where I could improve. And that was sort of like just a rocket ship of development then, because one, I actually started to become comfortable getting like sharp criticism and feedback. Mm-hmm. And then I also got better and more in tune with like taking in praise. And a lot of people don't like, right? Don't accept praise a lot.
Correct.
And it was really hard for me because for years I was groomed where it was like, yeah, good behavior. You did a good job, but what's next? Like, what have you done for me lately? Yeah. Like literally, that was in multiple companies within a corporate sales world. There was always sort of this funny underlying sentence that they always said, they joked about, but they were also really serious about was, what have you done for me lately? If you had a good month, yeah, great. But what do the last few days look like?
Right.
And so again, I know that's a lot, but I just started to believe like, I think I can do something. I do think I can make an impact in the world. So I don't have to work at this job, although it feels safe. Like I have money coming in. And so I found coaching at that point, right? I started to seek out like men's coaches, specifically Mankind Project was a really good jumping off point. And then I just started having conversations, being really intentional with setting up conversations, like new conversations around like, what do you do? How did you get there? What do you offer the world? And I found this whole world, right, of people that are coaches and life coaches and business consultants and, designers and like everybody finding their own little way in some way. And I was like, well, everybody's doing it now. So all of a sudden my world went from, I don't know how I could ever start anything on my own to like, it looks like everybody in my field is doing something on their own. Right. So it was almost an environment shift too.
Nice. And you told me when we chatted a little bit before recording that you had a significant number of fears surrounding this quit. Was your work with the men's group helping to address those?
It was. My fears were more deeply seated in self-worth, probably, right? Who am I to go do this?
Right.
Who am I to go say these things, And so, yeah, there was some reinforcement. Yeah, reinforcement was really important. They're like, if you want to go do this, then like, believe that. We believe in you, blah, blah, So there was certainly reinforcement that helped. And fear is one of those things where it's like, it doesn't ever go away. But your relationship to responding to it certainly develops over time.
Yeah.
So that's that's a muscle that was then cultivated over the next couple of years, where it was, okay, well, I'm going to build a website, and then, maybe I procrastinated a bit, but then finally I did, and I got feedback on the website, so there was step by step where it was like, well, all those things, maybe starting a website or putting a plan down where, well, I'm going to quit this job in a year. And starting to get really clear on these milestones, I was just able to deal with my fears a little bit more. There were some more practical things then that came along later that, using the body and things like that actually really helped me deal with fear too. And I can go into that. But yeah, I would say dealing with fear in a group environment too was very helpful.
And was that your main fear, kind of this imposter syndrome related fear of, am I good enough to do this thing? Or were there other fears as well?
I think one for sure, that what if I fail and I go and do it? I had to put all of that. I had to really put the ego aside and come to terms with you only live one time. Do what you want to do and give your gifts to the world. So it was a self-worth thing for sure. And then two, I was really caught on the money situation. We all have, no matter what your situation is, if you're listening to this, everybody, I think seriously, everybody has some sort of kink when it comes to, is there enough money and is there enough abundance for me to do that well? And, if I don't have these paychecks coming in, am I going to freak out when it gets tough down the road, and will I be able to handle it? There's all these head games that go on. So number two for me was money, and I'm still working on that.
Fair enough. I appreciate the vulnerability. We're all works in progress in different areas. You're the second person today. I recorded another podcast earlier, and I don't think she and I mentioned it while we were recording, but I want to pull something out of there that has been an important shift in my own life. You mentioned abundance, and I am well aware until maybe 3 years ago, I was definitely living out of a scarcity mindset. There is a finite amount of love and money to go around.
Yeah.
And it's going to be real hard to get some of either, frankly. And once you change to that, it was a therapist who said, you need to have an abundance mindset. There is imagine that there's an abundance of love and abundance of money out there just waiting for you to grab it. That had never occurred to me. So if this is the first time that some people are hearing that, I appreciate that you brought that up just to put that little nubbin of information in people's minds. If you're thinking, man, there's a finite amount of money, or some other people think, okay, there's already a finite amount of coaching or a finite amount of advising or consulting or whatever they might want to branch out and do.
Right,
and it's already saturated and there's not enough room for me there. That's just not it.
One. That is a big one right there, Lynn, for sure. So even if if you're closer to the real quitting of whatever, maybe if you're going to start your own business or whatever it is. And I've noticed this too, and starting my business and, starting to have clients and I still have this other one, this other demon that comes up where it's there's so many people now doing what I'm doing. And there's so many online programs, people can just get their information and their transformation through that stuff. God, why are they going to need me and stuff like that?
Yes.
And the reality is there's what is it, 7 billion people on the planet or whatever that, even if you had even if there was 1 million individual providers of some service, just one individual service, if you had 1,000 clients, you still wouldn't have enough. There's so many people on the planet that need things.
I recall, and I have not followed her much. I probably should, but somebody had just sent me something random from Marie Forleo, and I think it was about quitting. And I think then it auto played to the next video in which, and this is, how the universe works. She says in this video, she confronts that very issue, because I've had that same thought, what if I say something about quitting that somebody else has already said? Like you said, there are billions of people. Somebody has definitely already said probably everything I'm going to say. But she pointed out, think about how many times it sometimes takes for you to listen to a piece of advice. Maybe your mom is the first person to say it and you're like, whatever, mom. And then 4 friends say it. And then maybe finally your mentor says it and you take it seriously.
Right.
It's not that every person is going to say, oh, I've heard this message one time. It's more an issue of sometimes it's the right situation where you're hearing the message, or it may just be a person that you identify with or resonate with more than the others. Okay,
right.
If it's a parent, that's a whole different vibe than a mentor. And that's why there is room for all of the people doing all of the things,
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So from there, you prepared your finances for a quit? How did you do the transition there?
So at this point it was, maybe a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. 2 years ago. I definitely beat around the bush. Like I extended, I bumped into my fears too, and I extended the timeline. But, I said a general, here's some financial goals I have in mind. If I get to this point, like I can fully cut the cord, and I also then was like, okay, if I'm going to leave, I'm going to coach men, and if I'm going to leave this job, like how can I be most prepared to fully show up for other people immediately when I leave my job? So what tools might I need? And so that transitioned me into, okay, I'm going to learn from John Wineland, a guy that's very well known in the space of leading men's work and spiritual intimacy workshops for men and women. And I'll learn that framework. I'll learn that framework and what are some other tools I might need. So I came across the Wim Hof Method. Basically, gets people into cold water, gives them a breathing tool to optimize them at the cellular level. It's just this great thing. So I was like, okay, well, I'll get certified in that. Like I always wanted to get certified in yoga, and I never did anything about it. I've done yoga for like 10 years. And so I was like, okay, if I fully immerse myself in like a specific men's training framework, and I have this other tool that can also like be just a great starting point for anybody, male or woman. Like we do Wim Hof workshops. It's a 3-hour experience. Just did one in Norway last week. Like some of those people are like, this is the best experience of my life, because they weren't reading anything. Like they had to get themselves into cold water. They had to like really push themselves. And so with those tools, I spent a year really like collecting methodologies and tools to become a true expert at delivering experiences.
Nice. I have to say, I cannot wait to do a Wim Hof session at some point. If you haven't looked this up, I think there's a podcast about his story somewhere. There are probably many about his story.
He did a full tour, Wim Hof, did a tour with Joe Rogan and Rich Roll, all the major podcasts. But yeah, you can go to the websites, and some people have never heard of it. And it's definitely out there.
Yes. I struggle getting a 30-second cold shower in the morning. And I know, I see people sitting in these ice baths at XPT, et cetera. And I'm like, I need to Wim Hof it. At some point, this is going to happen.
Yeah.
It's a cool way to temper your sympathetic nervous system and kind of ramp up the parasympathetic, correct?
You got it. You got it.
Okay. I've listened well in these podcasts. We are totally on a tangent, but for people who, like myself, tend to get a little bit anxious and worked up, I think that's where it's supposed to hit you in the, that's your sympathetic that's all revved up, right?
Yeah.
And it's supposed to calm you down.
That's a huge part of this journey for me too, where I tell people part of my story too in the workshop experience, the Wim Hof workshop experience, where it's, I was on a plane almost every week, and I was drinking 4 coffees a day. I was, had all these meetings. I was 50 hours a week. So I was always kind of really going, and I was healthy. I've always worked out. I've always done yoga. I've been healthy, but I wasn't really healthy. I wasn't balanced really. And so, that method, I went really deep with that method because it was just, I don't know, it was a huge part of my transformation for sure. And yeah, I think if you're trying to make changes in your life and make a big move or a big step or whatever it is, maybe it's a relationship, the more you can take care of yourself on every level, the more intuitive and in tune with what your heart is telling you, so you can actually make a good decision, an aligned decision for that big move.
Yes. I love 2 things that you said. Being in alignment so that you can make good decisions comes up in 2 different ways in quitting. One, you need to be able to listen to those little clues when your body is telling you need to quit. So if you are just going, masking things with caffeine, killing any anxiety you have with alcohol, instead of listening to, okay, why am I anxious? Or why am I fatigued? Like you said, why am I hitting the snooze button? Then it's going to be really hard to know that something's in need of a quit.
Right.
And secondarily, once you do, like you said, when you get in that stage where you're planning a quit, it's really important to take great care of yourself, because the quitting process isn't easy. You're working 40, 50 hours a week, and then on top of it, going to Wim Hof trainings and doing the work and meeting with your coaching group and all these things. If you're not taking care of yourself, the quit's going to kill you just as much as anything else, just as much as the job was beforehand.
Yeah, and I've definitely experienced that overwhelm for sure in it, but when you are aligned with that big decision, and then if you make it, there's a lot of space that's created and a lot of lightness that comes with that. And I certainly experienced that, where I'm finding new ways to be more creative, and I'm getting all these kinds of new opportunities, and they're kind of just coming out of nowhere. And maybe it's just, like I made the right decisions, and I made the space to play full out. I think another thing too is I know a lot of people tend to give the advice of like, don't quit your job right away. And I know we keep going back to the job part, but I mean, it can be anything too, where it's like, if you're trying to make a big decision or a change and you kind of dabble your foot into the other side and what the other side could be for a little while, and then you're balancing both worlds. I just truly believe you do have to go all in. Quit and like really do it all full on.
Well, I mean, like you said, once you have the training, I think it's especially important, if you can, to do some of that training, like you said, before you make the quit, so that when you do make that leap, you're able to use, like you said, I want to be an expert on day one. I want to be ready.
Yes, there's definitely a part of that.
Now, quitting isn't easy. If it were, I wouldn't be necessary. And like, I'm going to quit. Okay, I'm taking off. I don't need to listen to this podcast. Well, I really appreciate you sharing your story with us, Travis. I will say in the intro how we know each other. But in the interim, would you please tell people, now Travis is in Austin, Texas?
I am in Austin, yeah.
Okay. Will you tell people in the Austin area or / anywhere else where they can find you? Because you're currently now doing this men's work, leading these men's workshops, right?
Yeah. And thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah. You're rocking it out with this message. I love it. Yeah, I'm in Austin. So you can find me on my website, travisroznos, ROZNOS.com. You can find me on Instagram. I'm finding Instagram is like a great gateway into like my world, I guess, on a day-to-day basis. And that's just T Roznos on Instagram. And yeah, we do Wim Hof workshops here in Austin. I'd say maybe once a month or so if you're here in Austin. And then I work with people one-on-one in a group format, of course. But yeah.
Excellent. Well, for everybody else out there listening, I appreciate your time. And until next time, happy quitting.